I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. You have this new book out, Rise Above.
Yes, I do.
So, about overcoming the victim mindset, empowering yourself, and realizing your full potential. Okay, so Scott Barry Kaufman, SBK, as we like to call you.
That's my friends call me. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. Are you trying to just fix everyone? Is that what's going on?
Oh boy. No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Okay.
My thing is I want to really help people, empower people to self-actualize in their own direction.
Okay.
And I would phrase it in that way. I don't know. Fixing is a funny word, right? It's like suggests there might be some sort of ideal standard upon which someone needs to be fixed. But yeah, I want to empower people to, really go for it.
Okay. And do you feel like that message is super important right now? I know one of the big things that you write about in your book is not just about achieving an empowered mindset, but also looking at all of the different ways that we are incentivized to not cultivate an empowered mindset in just regular culture. Can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what are you concerned about right now?
I'm concerned about a lot of things, but okay, I'll pick one from the air. The medicalization, the pathologizing of everything is one thing that I don't really like, and the TikTokization of therapy is another thing. So when I go on, well, I don't go on TikTok, but I people send me videos of people talking about young people talking about how every ex-boyfriend is a narcissist. Everyone has trauma, but trauma now comes in every form. Trauma comes from me not liking something that you said, and now I'm traumatized by your words. So yeah, people are adopting therapy language to just describe everyday normal human experience. In some ways, I want us to get back to the idea that you're allowed to feel anxious. Doesn't mean something's necessarily pathologically wrong with you because you're not happy all the time. I want to send people the memo more that that we're not supposed to be happy all the time as well. I want to send young people that memo that something's not immediately wrong the second that you feel an uncomfortable emotion. You're allowed to sit with it. And there's something called emotional regulation that I feel like we're not teaching people a good job about.
I see.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, to play devil's advocate for a second, I mean, you're a psychologist. You're somebody who is interested in optimizing human function. Is there something bad about the idea of aspire? You know how like some people aspire to like the longevity people aspire to never die? Is there something just like delusional or like just wrong about aspiring to be happy?
No. I want you to be happy, Amanda. I want you to be happy, Amanda. But yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to talk through these, I think, pretty nuanced issues. So, I created a course at Columbia in 2018 because I taught positive psychology at Penn for many years, and I felt like something was missing. It didn't feel like really me. And the course focused so much on happiness and life satisfaction. And I wanted to create a course that really acknowledged the whole person and didn't focus on happiness as the goal, but I want happiness for everyone. But I think the problem is when people focus on that as the primary objective in life, people tend to end up being less happy.
Is this what does this tie into what you call toxic positivity? Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, Susan David, other researchers have used that term. I didn't invent the term toxic positivity, but yeah, it really does just describe an ignoring of human suffering in some ways. In as long as you feel like you can restore your feelings of happiness. It doesn't matter what is going on around you. I'm an Eric Fromm guy. I'm like a humanistic psychologist. I don't know. I said it like that. I'm a humanistic psychologist, and like I've changed my identity over the years. It used to be like I'm a positive psychologist, but it didn't really sit with me well. Humanistic psychologist is really what I am, and a lot about that is recognizing the human condition, pointing us to new vistas, new possibilities, the potential within ourselves, but not ignoring suffering and not ignoring the realities of like the depths of our being, like the givens of human existence. I really love existential psychotherapy, for instance.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came into contact with existentialist literature when I was in prison, and it certainly
Not many
was
people can say that, by the way.
no.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, just because of the prison part of it, although more people are in prison than we'd like to think. However, yes, like I first came into contact with existentialist literature when I was in prison, and that difference, but like that was a big helping step for me to try to process my experience, because I think that my first several years in prison were sort of defined by a kind of toxic positivity where like both my family and I were reasserting constantly like, I don't belong in prison. Everything is going to be okay. Like, we just got to hang in there and everything's going to turn out all right. And it's not that we were like, it wasn't full-blown toxic positivity where we were just like, be grateful. Like I was grateful that I was alive instead of murdered, but it wasn't like anyone was pretending that like being in prison was not a bad thing, right? Like that I should just be grateful that I'm in prison. However, like I did come into conflict with my mom, especially after I was convicted and sentenced to 26 years in prison, that like when I started to have a shift in perspective and I started to try to I read Viktor Frankl and I
Yes.
tried to, you talk about tragic optimism and how you try to find meaning even in the midst of like despairing circumstances. You try to find opportunities. And I was doing that. I was practicing that in prison, but it put me a little bit in conflict with my mom because she was like, don't try to like create a life in there because your life belongs outside of prison. Like we are still fighting to get you out. Like for her, it was almost as if I was giving up on this project of getting me out of prison by trying to find meaning within prison. And I think that sort of speaks to this like tension that people have when it comes to wanting to acknowledge the traumas that exist in life, but also wanting to fight for what is right. And that tension is something that I want to talk to you about today when we talk about the victim mindset and how we can approach life with a nuanced awareness of suffering and challenge, but one in which it isn't utterly debilitating or we aren't deluding ourselves into thinking that it isn't there.
There are so many things I want to talk to you about.
Let's talk. Yeah,
Wait,
let's
well,
go.
wait, can I just like ask you a question? Do you identify as neurodiverse or sorry, neurodivergent?
I don't think so. I've been accused of being neurodivergent before, but mostly by
Accused? Oh
people.
no, I don't like that. 'Cause
Well,
I think it's a wonderful thing.
well, yeah, and I don't know enough about the whole discussion around neurodivergence. I imagine, I mean, like if you think about it, everyone's mind, like we don't know enough about the human mind to even say what is normal
Normal.
versus not normal.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Yeah.
in that way, we're all a beautiful snowflake. But like, I really don't understand enough about the conversation to have it. What I will say though is neurodivergence was a thing that was weaponized against me, or at the very least, like when people were first discussing when I was first arrested and they were like, why is this girl making out with her boyfriend outside of the crime scene or what, people, I think, exaggerated how I was responding. Like I wasn't making out with my boyfriend. He kissed me, very briefly. So like there was a certain level of exaggeration, but some people tried to argue that I was on the Asperger's spectrum, that I just didn't feel human empathy. Like there was a whole level of people trying to like diagnose me psychologically from afar based upon incomplete and cherry-picked information. And that's my experience with being sort of diagnosed from afar. I don't think I'm neurodivergent, but also I keep finding myself in situations where my response to things seems to be unusual. So I don't know how to, I don't know how to read into that.
Well, I recognize some like of your personality traits, especially that were interpreted in a negative light, but I interpreted, I resonated with it, and I was like, I have some of those similar traits that you have, and so it just dawned on me. I'm like, is she part of this club? Is she part of maybe, and what I mean by that is, I've always been very like when I'm nervous or when something terrible happens, I can get super awkward, and I can be like, like I would like be the type of person to have like done a break dance, and the police, had like, I know that people were saying you did yoga and that's such a horrible thing, but I know like anyone who knows me would be like, Scott, you probably would have started breakdance, or try to use humor to lighten the
Sure.
mood, and that does stem from I am a bit on the autism spectrum for sure, and whatever confluence of things, I'm an advocate for the beautiful aspects of neurodiversity. So I meant that as I'm trying to maybe you can reclaim that in a positive way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe. I mean,
yeah.
and again, like honestly, I really haven't gone down the rabbit hole enough to like say anything affirmative, but like, certainly ways that I respond to things differently than others. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's super different or not, that like when I'm in a moment of great difficulty, I tend to disassociate, or I tend to like freeze, or other situations like I tend to, instead of feeling a deep well of anger and resentment, I tend to feel a deep curiosity. Like that is some, like that I think is the principal thing, that it's like, well, is that a psychological difference, or is that just a mindset difference? I'm not sure. And what is
That's
how do you unpack that?
It's so interesting. I mean, there's this whole notion in the court system. I know you do so much great work here right now on wrongful convictions, and maybe we just need to change this idea of there needs to be a standard way of reacting, or else you're suspicious. I mean, what do you have if you have a Buddhist monk, found at a crime scene and they seem super zen? What are we going to be like? Oh, there's something suspicious here. Let's put them in a 40-hour, like interrogation room. Yeah, just maybe we need to rethink the normal reaction thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Especially when it comes to things that are like so subtle. Like, it's not like I was fleeing the country, which would be, like there are some behaviors that one could argue are like guilt adjacent, like they seem to suggest, but whether or not someone is crying or not crying is not, I think that is an oversimplification of whether or not that is indicative of guilt. Can we go,
Yeah,
can we like
absolutely.
define some terms
Yeah.
for the scope of the conversation so that people can understand a little bit how to enter into your work and what we want to talk about today? So you talk about the victim mindset. Okay. What is that? How would you define the victim mindset?
So I think that having a victim mindset means you tend to blame all your problems on external circumstances, whether it's that life dealt you a bad hand, or that a person or even an entire group of people have it in for you and are holding you back. It's all the liberals' fault, or it's all the all the Jews. That's a perennial one. You believe you don't need to take responsibility for your actions or reactions because of past trauma, and you can't stop ruminating about your past victimization in a way, and this is probably the most important part of it. You fixate on how to enact revenge and your past victimization so much that you rarely think about solutions or ways of moving forward with your life with hope and purpose.
Okay. So this is super key because I mean, clearly, this is something that I feel like the last time we spoke, you suggested that I might be experiencing some kind of narcissism. What was it? What was it? What was the narcissism that you were
Vulnerable.
vulnerable narcissism? Yes.
Did I,
Why are
did I
you
say,
shaking your head? Are
did I,
you
did I
like?
say that?
Yeah. You the last time we talked, you suggested that I might be experiencing some kind of vulnerable narcissism, which I did not take offense at because, especially, reading your book, like every one of us experiences a kind of vulnerable narcissism where something happens or whatever, maybe something doesn't happen, but we take something personally, we feel like and then we sort of fixate on it. And in my own case, like something genuinely bad did happen, but it's good to reflect upon whether or not the ruminating about it is an act of processing the experience or is an act of just like indulging in the suffering of it. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about the difference between processing a traumatic event and indulging in it.
Well, you nailed it. You really did. I mean, there's a type of rumination called productive rumination that's what researchers call it, and they do try to distinguish it from pathological rumination or unproductive rumination. And for instance, the process of journaling, like Jamie Pennebaker's work on journaling and being able to take some of these experiences you've had and putting down on paper in a way that allows you to process the emotions is considered a form of productive rumination. I'm certainly not making an argument that people need to just get over it. That's not the argument in my book at all. And when you were talking about being in jail, I want to make the point that the first half of my book is all the ways that we're in jail in our own heads. Or
Yes,
prison. The word as I want to use is prison, not jail. Sorry, prison. We have a mental prison, and I wanted to show people, regardless of whether or not you're in literal jail or not. I think a lot of people are in prison in their everyday life, and they're outside of jail, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first 5 chapters of my book really are about the victim mindset in a way that I don't focus on external circumstances. I focus on all the ways that you're getting in your own way by having distorted thinking, by identifying too much with your emotions, by becoming a people pleaser usually as a result of having a trauma, and then we develop overly people pleasing tendencies. It's so interesting when I view like I watched the Hulu special about you. It's a bit awkward,
Yeah.
a bit surreal, I will say, saying that to someone because I don't have too many friends who have Hulu specials about them. But
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. But like what I see when I watched that was like I was like, oh, I think she was neurodivergent. But what I saw was I think you're like really trusting and actually innocent. And in some ways you were too innocent for and so it's so paradoxical. I just saw so many paradoxes, in watching that, is that you were so trusting and so like, well, of course they're not gonna like, they're not thinking of me. Like, I think you didn't realize till much later. They realized much earlier that you're a suspect. They see you as I don't think you I don't think you realize that. And like, you're innocent. You were like not just literally innocent, but you're an innocent person. And a playful person, and quirky. So yeah, I'm happy to see that that you're getting a chance for people to see who you really are, finally, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Thanks. Let's talk about the prison of the mind then, because I agree, like, even in my latest book, which did I send you a copy of free? Yeah, did I send you?
No, no, no.
Okay, I'll send it
I
to you
love the
after
copy.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole point of my latest memoir, Free, is talking about like even after getting out of prison, how was I a prisoner to this, this traumatic thing that had happened to me? How was I a prisoner to the ongoing consequences of what this bad thing that happened to me? And how was I a prisoner of my own mind? Like, how had I cultivated a sense of learned helplessness? How was I, and this journey of trying to reclaim a sense of freedom in my life that didn't really have to do with what the external circumstances were, but had everything to do with the kind of mindset that I cultivated in order to feel free regardless of those external circumstances. So I feel like that's a little bit like a memoir that's one person doing what you're attempting to do, or what you're attempting to teach people to do and rise above. So let's talk about those prisons that our own mind puts us in. What are those?
Well, maybe it'd be helpful to your audience to just talk about the seminal learned helplessness studies, um, because they started with dogs, and Martin Seligman shocked dogs while they were in a cage that was closed, and they would kind of modify the time period upon which they'd open the cage, and the dog could just go free, And they found there tended to be a point where when they opened the cage, after enough repeated shocks, the dog didn't leave. The dog didn't leave the cage. And so those seminal studies, which are a little bit controversial too, because nowadays
Because
you're shocking dogs.
ethically, yeah, you're psychologically
Yeah.
destroying dogs. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Well, and I will say they started to do this on humans too. So they went dogs, rats, and then they went to and they started studying learned helplessness in humans. And what was interesting is they found in humans that the same principle didn't apply. And they wrote this paper 50 years later that they had the theory exactly backwards. And you can only discover that when you look at humans, because we are a little bit different than dogs. What is learned in the dogs was helplessness, but in humans, it turned out helplessness was the default state, and that what needs to be learned is hope. And so there's this whole new concept in my field called learned hopefulness. My friend Dan Tomasua wrote a wonderful book called Learned Hopefulness that I wrote the foreword to, and that's really what a lot of my work is about. Is showing people that your default state really is being a victim to your own mind, but there are so many strategies and things we can do to learn to realize that we're not stuck, and we're not as stuck as we think we are. Yeah.
Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah, I'm familiar with that horrific study on the dogs. And I also am aware of, there's stories about how they train elephants. Like, they'll tie the leg of a baby elephant to a stake, and they can't get away, and they'll scream and cry, and they just learn that the rope around their leg means they can't move. And then once the elephant gets to be bigger, they don't even have to tie the rope to a stake. It just imprints upon the elephant's mind that when the rope is around their leg, they can't move. Even, now that they're this giant, a tremendously strong creature that no stake could actually hold them in the ground. They just learn that. And again, devastating, horrible things that we learn about breaking the mind or instilling a sense of helplessness on other animals' minds. But I had not heard this idea that the default state of humans is helplessness.
And even a victim mindset.
Really?
There's such a primal thing, and they locate it in the brain to a specific part of our primal reward structure, where there's something that rewards us for being in this victim mindset stage. And I also think it'd be really useful to make the distinction and say you can have trauma without being traumatized, and you can be a victim without having a victim mindset. These are different concepts. My book is about a victim mindset, and I think that can be independent of our life experiences. I think we also, in one extreme case, we see people play the victim sometimes who have nothing really challenging has happened to them, but they are using that as a way to manipulate others. And I have a whole section in my book about the dark triad traits and playing the victim. So I just think it's important to recognize these things are separate. And I have the utmost of compassion and empathy, care, whatever word you want to use. Because there's a whole debate whether or not empathy or compassion is more important, blah, blah, blah. But put that aside. I have the utmost of compassion. Oh, nerds. Don't you love nerds? But I have the utmost of compassion for people who have gone through horrible, challenging experiences. But there's actually a rethinking in our field about these experiences, and researchers are no longer calling them traumatic experiences. It used to be the day where all abuse and whenever something violence happened to you, we would call that a traumatic experience. But now we call them potentially traumatic experiences, PTEs. George Bonanno is leading the way on that, and I very much like that approach. And what it does is it recognizes a couple things. One, not everyone who has had the same experience will react in the same way, but also the story that we tell about our experiences, we want to leave it a little more open for people to be able to tell us as clinicians and therapists what they're experiencing and how they would like, what story would they like to tell, as opposed to the clinician imposing the story that
Right.
will be the story of their life. Does that make
I
sense?
mean, that's a really interesting thing, because what that opens up potentially is that any experience could be potentially traumatic depending on the mindset that you have as you process it. So like, even something that someone would, and I think that that actually plays out in real life, where you see, like, people who have the best lives that you could possibly think imaginable, and yet they're depressed or they commit suicide, where there are some people who have, what we would expect to think of as a very depressing and traumatized life. They've experienced war, they've experienced loss, and yet they have, they're happy and fulfilled and, grateful to be alive. And so I feel like that actually is an interesting way of suggesting that, and it's so Zen actually, that, like, this sort of Zen perspective is there is no good or bad. It's all just how you experience it in your mind. And so even something like, losing your kid, like, there's a whole proverb about this woman who lost her kid and how just, like, so psychologically tortured she was over this. But, like, when she confronted the Buddha about it and he was like, well, we all experience suffering, like, she had an enlightened moment, and that was her opportunity for enlightenment. So,
So
sorry,
well
just
put.
rambling. I'm just
Oh
rambling
no,
at you.
no, no. It's so well. It's exactly on the same frequency as the point I was trying to make. And also, I want to just really welcome in this conversation any criticisms you have of my book or anything that came up. That I love that you can you're welcome to disagree with me and stuff. But exactly what you just said is exactly how I think about it. Um, and there is a trait called the highly sensitive person. Okay, well, actually, let me back up a second. This might be really interesting to your listeners. There's actually genes that have been discovered that make it more likely whether or not you'll be a highly sensitive person or whether or not you'll be stolid across all contexts. It's called, yes, and there's so much nuance here that I think that will be really fascinating to you. So it's called the orchid dandelion hypothesis. There are some genes that make it more likely that you'll be the kind of temperament where you'll be super sensitive to all environmental input, good and bad. And that means good as well, meaning like you feel things more deeply, you feel love more deeply. You feel not all being sensitive to environmental input's bad, right? Like you listen to a cello concerto and you start crying, right? Like it's a whole it all comes together, like the good and the bad. And then there are genes that make it much more likely that you will be resilient and like just standing there with the winds blowing, but you won't move regardless of what the winds are. But the twist ending, the twist to this research is that they took kids who had the genes predisposing them to being a highly sensitive temperament, and they took them in summer camp. And they found that a lot of them did have abuse in their childhood, and that also can be a precursor of being a highly sensitive person, but not always. But a lot of these kids, they have been through a lot, and they had this highly sensitive temperament, and they allowed them to explore their environment. So they had a lot of anxiety, but they gave them the autonomy to choose what activities they wanted to get involved in, to really explore things with curiosity. They found out that their anxiety was transformed into curiosity. And what researchers are starting to realize now and rethink about these genes is that it used to be back in the day that they said these genes coded for anxiety, but now the researchers are saying, well, that's not true. These genes code for environmental sensitivity, but if you're in an environment that is allowing you to explore, isn't fear-based, isn't abuse based, but is allowing you to have creativity and curiosity and art, and engage in, in all these aspects of curiosity. These individuals turn out to be the most curious, creative people of them all. They outperform the ones that were, the resilient thing. So there's actually a potential here. If we nurture people with those genes in the right way, they can actually be the most creative people in our society. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, so then you know what I will say, you invited one thing that, or you invited me to like question or challenge
Yeah.
something that you
I
put
really love
forward.
your
And
honest impressions. Yeah. Yeah.
well, no, I mean, I'm not here to like review the book necessarily, but I will say that there's one thing that you have proposed as part of like the empowerment mindset that, there are lots of ways that you have proposed having an empowered mindset that resonate with me. And I think we should get into all of those things. But one of the ones where I was like, was you often suggest like you propose that we should have like a vision for ourselves. Like we're, here we are, we're a little sailing ship and we should be driving towards some kind of port. But like my experience, and maybe this is just something that I need to work through in order to have a more empowered mindset, is after having like everything taken away from me and like all sort of any sense of like certainty about, any plans I might have in life. I went to Italy to go study abroad and I was thrown in prison. Like that sort of feeling of not trusting that any of our plans can ever actually like play out has led me to have a different kind of mindset when it comes to ideas about achievement, right? Like if someone were to ask me what's your 5-year plan, what's your 10-year plan, I honestly don't know how to respond to them because I cannot bring myself to think in those terms because I just don't have trust that the world is going to go according to some kind of plan. And instead, the approach that I take is, there's always a way forward. I just have to keep an open mind and be adaptable and nimble enough to like feel where directions and opportunities take me in the present moment, which has led me to like some really surprising and fun, things. And I feel like I've accomplished a number of things in my life as a response or as in doing and like taking that approach. But I certainly don't really feel like I have a port of call that's calling to me. So I'm wondering, like, how does someone who has lost faith in plans, how does that play into the empowered mindset?
There's so much there.
You're like, oh God.
It's a great question, and you're such a unique case too, right? Like, you're a unique case, and so let me just think this through. One way I define trauma, if someone were to say, Scott, what is trauma? One way I would define it is that you've had a psychologically seismic earthquake happen to you that literally changes and violates your view of the world and how the world works. This is a working definition of trauma that a lot of people in the field use.
Check.
Yeah, and
Check.
I mean, you're the prototypical example. If anyone were to be like, Amanda, you didn't really go through a real trauma, like, get the fuck out of here. Sorry, am I allowed to curse?
Some people do say you are absolutely allowed to curse, and some people do say that. But yes,
like, you
go
are
ahead.
literally the prototypical example of whether you wanted it to be a trauma or not, or that was your story or not. I mean, it fits the definition of the post-traumatic growth literature. This is how they define it. Tedeschi and Calhoun, that's how they define a trauma, is a psychologically seismic earthquake that happens to you that violates your expectations about how the world works. Okay, so that's what you're talking about, and that did. And the question is, does that have to be the lingering effects of that? Does it have to happen your whole life? And there are the realities of, well, can people ever see you in a different way? You are a little bit limited as well by, and I'm sure there's a frustration there. Like, for instance, you could decide this moment, I will never ever talk about what happened to me ever again from this second forward, and I'm going to become a Broadway actress. I don't know, I'm making something up, and I'm never going to talk about my past ever. But is it realistic to say that once you become the Amanda Knox on Broadway, that people aren't going to think of Amanda Knox as Amanda? So in some ways, I have the utmost of empathy or compassion, whatever, for what that must be like. But I also think that within the container of your life, you do have so much drive and purpose to make things right in the world. You do this work with prison reform, right? With wrongful convictions. I don't know why you don't consider that part of your 10-year plan, because that is something that means a lot to you, right? And you see that going off. And so within the container of what happened to you in your past, you decided you're not going to have a victim mindset about it, and you're going to use that as fuel to make the world a better place. This idea of like, what is your purpose? I mean, I think that's a terrible question. I never ask my students that question. What is your purpose? It's such a big pie in the sky. It's intimidating. Let's just say it's intimidating. But what brings you meaning in your life is a great question. You're doing a lot of things that bring you meaning in your life, and I think that's enough.
Okay, so I guess that would mean that the port of call doesn't have to be like a clear sense of, I'm going to be the CEO of this company that does this thing necessarily. It's more like you have a clear sense. So something that can be empowering is you have a clear sense of how actionable things that you do have meaningful, like, result in something that is meaningful to you. Is that what
Absolutely.
you mean?
I do. Look, all of us make choices about our future based on our unique personality and who we are and who we came from, what we came from. I mean, have trauma from my childhood labeled as special ed. I don't know if you know that whole part of that whole.
Yeah, I read it in your book.
They all thought
Yeah.
I was bull. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and for me to say that didn't impact, I mean, that literally impacted what I'm doing today. And I think that's a wonderful thing. What happened to you in your past, I'm not saying you should ever escape that. I'm saying you're doing exactly what someone who lives a good life does. They take what happened to them, and that informs the mission that they're on and the messages they want to provide in the world. If I didn't have these experiences as being told I was stupid and all this, I probably wouldn't have been fueled to like go to Yale, or go to to do anything actually great with my life. It's probably the best thing in the world happened to me. So I actually want to view some of this through the lens of post-traumatic growth and that whole field of investigation, because I really don't think I would have been as ambitious in my life if it weren't for the really crappy things that happened to me as a child.
Hmm. Yeah, can we maybe talk about, like, can we like put some sort of notes up on the board about what defines a victim mindset and the opposite thing of what defines an empowered mindset? Because I think that would be really cool. Like, one of the things that you just suggested, and for me, this is something that I try to convey to people, is when I think about the trauma in my past, I do not feel like I have taught myself to realize that I am not like predestined by this thing, but I am informed by it. So it's a difference. I don't feel trapped or boxed in by the past thing. but I'm also not pretending that that past thing didn't exist. Like I'm absolutely motivated and informed, but instead of feeling like it's holding me back, it's propelling me forward. I think that would be a good example of that purposefulness versus hopelessness kind of thing. What are some of the other things that define a victim mindset, and what is their opposite counterpart in an empowered mindset?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a one-to-one opposite, but let's go through some of the empowerment mindset items and see how, maybe you're applying them in your life. Yes, something, because the whole premise of empowerment mindset is yes and. It's like improv. And whereas victim mindset flavor um, would be that this is the thing that happened and it defines me. But so I guess I could actually do this. I could do the counterpart thing. If I think, yeah, I could if I think about it a little bit more, I probably can do it on the spot. But uh, an empowerment mindset is yes, something crappy happened to me, maybe horrific happened to me, and it has affected me, and it doesn't define me. And so that would be an empowerment mindset. Empowerment mindset is very yes and. I have deep reservoirs of resilience within me and can handle difficult situations. So you acknowledge that as well. Another thing would be I don't want to be reduced to the worst thing that has happened to me. Instead, I'd like to be seen as a whole person that includes my strengths as well as what happened to me. I'm not trying to demote or sweep under the rug horrific things that may have happened to a person, but we're going to play
That's
yes.
what the toxic positivity might
That
be,
would be
where you
toxic
sort
positive. Yes,
yes,
yes, yes.
right.
Definitely, definitely. But to me, it's a lot more empowering to integrate these things than to the victim mindset would say. This is the worst thing that happened to me is who I am. The worst thing that happened to me, there's no hope for me in the future because of what has happened to me. That one thing that happened to me when I was 3 means I can never fall in love again, or I can never, be in a meaningful relationship. I can never be happy like other people can be happy. You're telling yourself this story that you're literally saying I'm going to put myself in a mental prison.
Is it of, would you define the victim mindset as being one where you say to yourself, I'm not going to be okay until somebody else
Yeah.
makes it right?
Well, that's a cognitive bias. The I'll be happy when dot 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 is one of the cognitive biases, and I have a whole chapter, man.
A whole
I
chapter.
know. I hear myself. I say that a lot. Yeah, yeah. I have a chapter on don't be a victim to your cognitive distortions, and and that is a cognitive distortion is that I'll be happy when, and you just think back to any moment when you've reached a certain thing that has made you feel happy forevermore, and you'll realize that's never happened to you and it never will happen to you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
what are some of the others?
Well, this idea of external locus of control versus internal locus of control is a big one. So my reactions are within my control would be an internal locus of control. A victim mindset would take an external locus of control. My reactions are entirely determined by other people. And that's why I also have the whole section on FOPO, fear of people's opinions and overcoming that. People who fall too much into the FOPO mentality start to get into a victim mindset a little bit because they're like, oh, well, I'm not allowed to do anything unless people like it, and that really, again, that way of thinking puts you in your own mental prison. And then also just believing in that you have strengths of because of your adversity, you've developed strengths. I think that's a big one that's really
As
empowering.
opposed to because of your adversity, you're allowed to be an asshole.
Well, that's a big one. Yes, that's true too. That's true too. That's true. Or
Like
because
there's excuse, this bad thing happened to me, and so I don't have to take responsibility for my actions,
yeah.
or I don't have to be a nice person, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the study um, where when they had people think of a time that they were wronged in their past, so they activated that in their head, they were more likely to like punish an innocent person? Like a subject would come in, they'd be like, "Do you want to give the subject a little white noise sound to drive them crazy?" They give a little more puff of air if they thought about a time they'd been wronged, or even if they've been wronged. So within the confines of the psychology experiment, they had a situation where they gave some errors about like marking things right or wrong, and they gave you an F when you didn't deserve an F, and so they got you in that mindset. So I also want to be clear that we all can fall prey to this. This is a big point in my book, is that this is we all it's a dynamic mindset. A victim mindset is I wanted to get away from this idea like it's only your ex-boyfriend who has it, right? Or your mother who has it. Those are the two go-tos in the self-help literature, is blame everything on your mother or blame everything on your ex-boyfriend. But I think that we all can have moments where we go in and out of this dynamic mindset, and being able to be aware of that and to think in a little bit more empowered way, I think will help all of us. Yeah.
Mm. Here's a question
Yeah.
for you. And it's something where I don't really have a good answer for this, because I want to know what you think about setting boundaries, because I know that, putting yourself out there, getting out of your comfort zone, um, being more like open to people and receptive to people, these are all signs of having a more empowered mindset. Is that correct? Okay. And I try to practice that in my day-to-day life. But one of the things that I think that really holds people back in a victim mindset is this fear that if they open themselves up to people, or if they empathize with people, if they have compassion for people, that's somehow going to negate the bad thing that happened to them. They somehow have to, like, it's almost like you have to be performing your trauma for anyone to acknowledge that your trauma ever happened. And once you start like being okay or opening yourself up to new experiences, that's somehow like denying the fact that the bad thing happened. And I'll give you a very practical example of this, where like I've absolutely had people say to me, "Well, you seem to be doing just fine, so you clearly must have not gone through something very bad." Like there's this idea that like the more broken you are, that suggests how traumatic the thing was. And if you're not a broken person in the aftermath of it, that means that you didn't really experience something traumatic. And so there's this sort of like diminishing of the struggle that a person experienced. But like, in my own life, I also choose to set certain boundaries to protect myself, given, what I've gone through. And I don't know if that means that I'm in a victim mindset or not, or if I like, is there a way to set healthy boundaries that does not mean that you are succumbing to a victim mindset? I'm sorry, I keep giving you these like long, convoluted, difficult questions.
No, and it is, yeah, it is convoluted. Not convoluted. It is a difficult. It is, but I'm wondering why. And I think it's because of yeah, it has to be because of the onslaught of the media and what they did, to you. But you're still very, very, you care very much about perception of you, right?
I mean, yeah, yes, in the sense that like the way people perceive me impacts the way that they choose to interact with me. And so, that impacts how what opportunities I might have in life, or how people like, there are certain expectations that people might have of me based upon their perception. And so I think people's perceptions do impact us in a very real way. It sort of creates the world and the things that we then have to engage with. And so if
I mean, like it makes me angry that someone would say to you that because you may be you smile, you laugh that like it must not have been so bad I mean, that makes me so mad, and my immediate reaction to that is like, I want to like tell that person like, fuck off, like,
Well, I think that's not just a fear of mine, but I think that that's a general fear. And like when I talk to people about their trauma and what's potentially holding them or keeping them sort of locked in and in like indulging in that state of trauma, it's this fear that if they if they relinquish it, that somehow it means that it didn't happen. Like it's such like, a traumatic event, as you defined it, is something that really just like utterly causes you to like reframe your entire understanding about life and existence and the institutions that we rely on. It's something that's so fundamental to how we understand the world. And I think there is a fear that if you do not display your trauma, it's not just about getting accolades and people, patting you on the head for, like performing your traumatizedness. But it's also the counterpart to that is this fear that if you do not perform your traumatizedness, that it somehow invalidates this struggle that you experience that is a big part of who you are.
I completely agree. No, I think you're pointing out something very true and unfortunate, and I'm trying to think of the best inroad to this because and this might not be a great example, but um, in a lot of ways, people they think you're downplaying something, right? If you don't constantly talk about if you're not in the kind of victim mindset aspect of it, you're somehow downplaying it,
Right.
and it's
Or
like,
being glib or flippant
mhm,
about it. Yeah.
mhm. But there's also something else going on here, which I'm trying to articulate in my head as you were talking. So thanks for tap dancing a little bit for me. I appreciate it as I try to think this through. I remember I used to be very overweight, and I remember I went through this, and I had a lot of overweight friends. And I remember that I went on this whole thing where I lost like 40 pounds, and my friends, some of them saw me for the first time, and they suddenly hated me. And yeah, I know, but I think there's something in the human where they're like, well, I'm, like, oh, you think you're better than us now. You think you're better than us because you know, you're no longer like us anymore and overweight. And I wonder if there's some bias in humans or something where like, let's say I'm a sexual assault survivor and I'm not there in the stage of development that someone else is at, where they've gotten to a point in their healing where they are more empowered, and they are, we're all at different points in our journey. I think we should all honor that. But I also realize that the kind of world we live in, it could make someone feel like, how dare they,
Be
gloat.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how dare they be okay? That's right. That's right. And we do live in such a victim mindset culture. This is a critique I have of our American modern day culture, and young people are so incentivized on social media to be talking about their pain and their suffering, and they're almost like competing for attention on who is suffering the most, and that's what gets people followers and likes, that we don't appreciate and encourage healing and growth and empowerment as much as I think we should. And that is a main message of my book. But you really do bring up something really profound about that makes my mission hard, because of the way humans are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I agree. Like, do you have you ever seen the show Community?
You're like the third person to ask me that, and no, I haven't. Should I? I think I
Oh,
should,
you
right? Yeah.
it's one of my all-time favorite shows, but there's this one, especially if you love neurodivergence, that one of the main characters is neurodivergent and you would love it for that reason. But also I'm just thinking about this one episode where one of the characters goes to an acting class. He signs up for acting class, and the teacher tells all of the students that they have to tap into some trauma from their past in order to be good actors, right? Like that you need to really tap into what's true and authentic to you in order to get to those like high places of, artistic blah, 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 blah. And so everyone's sort of going around the circle talking about this traumatic thing that has happened to each of them. And it falls upon, the character that we're following, who just happens to be a kind of guy who's never had anything bad happen to him. Like he's just like, oh my God, I don't have anything bad happening to me. And he freaks out and then he lies and he tells everyone that he was sexually molested when he was a kid. And so then he has to like keep pretending this lie and everyone's like, "Oh my God, you have the worst thing of all." And so now he's feeling guilty that he lied to everyone, and eventually he fesses up to the teacher that he doesn't, this wasn't true. He lied because he felt pressure to have some kind of trauma, some kind of pain in his past in order to be a good actor. And the teacher says, you have the most pain of all, the pain of having no pain.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Oh,
See,
man. So brilliant. It's so bright. So the ones who that's one, and then also ones who have had a lot of pain but have great coping strategies. They're kind of shunned from the kingdom as well. So both.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked at length, and I think we've gone a little bit all over the place. So sorry to our
Probably my
listeners for
fault.
sort of being
Probably
like
my fault.
all over the place. No, not anyone's fault. What are some like, I think maybe what I want to end this conversation on is, first of all, encouraging everyone to read Rise Above because it's great. It's very practical. It's very useful. I think one of the things that you talk about is like, this is a very personal book. It's one where we can learn to identify how we might personally be imprisoned in the victim mindset and how we might get out of it. But there's also a bigger question, which is, if we are in a victim mindset culture, how do we individually interact with that culture such that we can collectively move out of a victim culture into an empowered culture? Because that's something where it's like, well, is that something that is actually within our control?
I love that question so much, and what a great way to end this interview. Bring people along with you on your journey. That's my answer. Rise the tide for everyone. There are people who individualistically will talk about their pain. No one can possibly understand my pain. Like no one can understand. You're a liberal and I'm a conservative. What can you understand about my pain? And so and it creates a separation between you and the world. And then there are those on the other end who are like, oh, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Like, I'm great. Like everyone else who's suffering. You're suffering because you're not as good as me. Look at me. I overcame. There needs to be a third way. There needs to be a way where we talk about our journey, we talk about our pain, we talk about all the things we've been through in a way that's relatable, in the way that you make it clear that you believe in others who have gone through similar things. And because, the things you've learned and the ways in which you've been able to grow, you want to help others who are in a similar position grow. So bring people with you in this journey. There's too much individualistic performative on both ends, I think. We talked a lot about the performative victimhood, but I also think there's something we can call, I don't know, this is the first time I've talked about this, but I see it too. Like there's kind of like performative look at me, like a bragging kind of thing, like you're bragging that you overcame this and all these other people didn't overcome it. You see that sometimes in the bro world, like, whoa, just wake up at 4 a.m. That's it. What, all these suckers who aren't waking up at 4 a.m. But I just think that, you know what I mean? I think there's a third way.
Cold showers.
Yeah. And some of that I think is a performative. That to me, that's the other end, of this, is that there's something performative there too, which is, look how great I am, that I'm waking up at 4 and you're not, suckers. But I think there's a third way. And I think there's a way of doing this. I think you're doing it. Maybe I feel like maybe I'm flattering you too much today, but I mean it. Like, you're doing it. There's a third way where you are like, look, this is for everyone. It's empowerment, and what I've been through and the way I've overcome it, I've learned a lot that I'm teaching others, and I want there to be hope for all of you. And this is my mission, is to show you, that there's hope for all of us. And I also want to minimize this kind of mindset we have, which is you would not understand what I've been through because you're a X white man, X person of substitute whatever you want there. That's something I don't think is great for society, that way of thinking. Yeah.
Like identifying with the trauma.
Yes, yes, and also not recognizing there's a common humanity to most of our suffering. Okay, okay, I'll stop with a quote from Carl Rogers. What is most personal is most universal.
Great. Well, where can everyone follow you, learn more about your work, SBK?
Oh, well, scottbarrykaufman.com pretty much has it all there. And you can buy my books and stuff. And also, I just started a new podcast with Second City called This Might Get Awkward, because I am super awkward, and I'm leveraging it towards the good. So we're trying to see how we can use improv. I'm working with a improv comedian co-host, Allison Reese from Second City, and yeah, we're trying to save the world and reduce divides by playing improv with people we disagree with, as opposed to shouting
Oh,
at
fun.
them. Yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.